present the official release or briefing of the human and material damage happened on Tigray's education and educational system. So to start with, as you know, the fascist and invading forces, meaning the Abiy Ahmed-led Ethiopian forces, Isaias Afwerki-led Eritrean forces, and the Chauvinist-led Amhara forces like Amhara militia, Amhara special forces, and the Amhara Fano, declared a genocidal war in consortium and indeed committed genocide on the people of Tigray. Among their genocidal targets, education and educational infrastructure were the top focuses of these invading and fascist forces. This is not a simple accusation or allegation on them. They themselves spilled the beans on how they objectively planned and destroyed Tigrayan infrastructure, and Abubakar Tadessa's speech was exemplary for this. One of the military commanders of the Ethiopian regime. They also targeted human and historical educational capacities of Tigray. They are well aware of damaging education as best instrument to eliminate people in both short and long term. And they did it on our people. They killed our people, and among the killed, members of educational society, like students, teachers, and educational leaders and assisting staffs, were the ones. Female students, teachers, and staffs of the educational system are victims of the brutal sexual violence and killings. Whatever happened to female Tigrayans happened to female educational society members of Tigray. What happened to our people and to our educational system is beyond what we managed to explain, actually. What we are going to present here is limited to direct material and life casualties. To mention the participants in this study, NGOs which are members of education cluster under ECC, Education Coordination Center, meaning Tigray Teachers Association was part, volunteered Tagaru scholars and other dedicated contributors, and Bureau of Education taking the role of coordination. And this is an opportunity for me to thank all the participants in this study for educational casualties. The methodology we used is basically based on primary sources of information. We used questionnaires, interviews, images and video records, and in fact, on-field observations. Finally, the combined informations were analyzed and recorded using ICT system, which is now ready to anyone authorized to use the data from Bureau of Education. This study has got its own limitations like any study. Among the limitations, this data shall be known that it is limited to September 2014. We analyzed this report based on the data up to September 2021 in the European calendar, actually. So damages happened after that are not entertained, so they need separate study. And it also excludes Western zone because it's not accessible because it is under the invaders' administration. In fact, few areas under Eritrean forces and certain areas under security threats, which are situated around the borders of Amhara and the lakes, and some of them which we couldn't manage to get information after we studied. We couldn't get the feedback from a few of the areas because of the highest limitation in communication, because we don't have fuel after some time. And it actually excludes governmental and non-governmental higher education institutions and TVETs. TVETs may study separately their own, and the higher education is the same. And private higher education institutions the same. So we don't include them. Again, this report do not address, though it is obvious as an implied effect, but we don't address the socio-economic implications, the psychosocial implications, and even the monetary estimations are not addressed. All the repercussions after the damage are expected to be studied using professionals and dedicated institutions separately. Here, I want to stress that this is a first-level draft report in terms of coverage and time, space coverage and time coverage, because of the reasons I mentioned earlier. So it needs revisiting, again studying and revitalizing the report to include the latest casualties happened in the education and educational system of Tigray. Regarding coverage of the study, it covers 6 zones: the South Zone, Southeast, Maqala, Eastern Zone, Central Zone, and Northwest Zone. We tried to assess 2,054 schools under the mentioned accessible zones. And among the accessible areas, 91.3% of them are included in this report. The ones which are not included are left because of many things I mentioned earlier, including the communication problems. And we also covered 2 educational colleges, Adwa and Abi Adi Education College. Before I directly pass to the immediate damages reported here, it's good to see the status of the educational system in Tigray during 2020. During 2020, we had governmental and non-governmental schools, primary schools, 2,221, and 271 secondary schools, 2 teachers' colleges, and we had enrolled students amount to 1,464,385, with gender parity index 0.99. Almost half of the population of the students were the gender parity between female and male. Number of teachers and educational leadership we had during 2020 was 46,598. According to estimations by Statistics Agency, Tigray could enroll 1.7 million students in this academic year, 2021-2022, had things went normal. No aggression, no other problems. But we obviously know aggressors happened, aggressors aggressed us and practiced many problematic issues which amount to genocide. And we had 2 years backlog of no enrollment, and no graduation. So assuming this, we could have enrolled. Had we reopened the schools completely from grade 1 to 12, we could have around 2 million students in schools today, which is impossible to manage it now. Saying this, I want to directly go to the reports of the damage, which are mere figures, mere percentages. To start with, the lives lost from the educational society of Tigray: 1,911 students, 235 teachers and other staff members, including the academic leadership. Totally, 2,146 members of the educational society lost their lives during the aggression period, out of which 1,798 are female and 348 are male. This is a mere figure depending on the data we had till September 2021. Even before and after, we could have life casualties. We may have life casualties in different areas that we couldn't access and we couldn't get any information about them. We have people, including educational members, members of society of the education system in Tigray, fled to Sudan, and in IDPs, and probably in different inaccessible areas. So this number is limited to the information we had only. It could be, it is expected to be more than that. That's why I mentioned this is a first draft study and need revisiting and restudy. Regarding material damage, the direct damage on materials and facilities, classrooms, if we see classrooms, 88.7% is damaged. 88.27. Administration buildings, 31.65%. Combined desks, 96.45%. Blackboards, 95.86%. Textbooks, 63.49%. Teacher's guide, 58.67%. Reference books, 53.40%. Students' toilets of girls and boys, 47.2% and 48.7% respectively. Teachers and staff toilets, 50.5%. Hand wash units, 68.8%. Water tankers, 66.82%. Computers, 85.1%. Plasma TVs, both in classrooms and in stores, 79.88 and 86.96 respectively. Lab equipment, 84.49%. Pedagogical centers or equipment, 92.5%. Chalks, 81.2%. Special need resources, which are very vital for our special needs society, 83.0% of it is damaged. And here I want to declare that Abiy Adi Teachers College is 100% damaged. Saying this, when we see the damage level in terms of the indicators of the education development measurement, it's good if we see the past status and the current status of the education system in Tigray. We took the status in 2020 versus this year's status. That means 2021-22 academic year. As an indicator, if we take a radius of walking distance to schools, home to school distance, average home to school distance of accessing primary schools. In 2020, it was 2.5 kilometers, excluding Western Zone. Current status of this indicator is 7.3 kilometers. That means we have got declined back to 1992. This was the status in 1992. Working radius to access secondary schools, we had 7 kilometers radius in 2022. Now it reached 17 kilometers. And this is the status during 2005. Section to students ratio in primary schools, we had 39 students in a section during 2020. Now, the mere numbers, if you take, it will be 434 students in a classroom, which is impossible. That means taking 50 students even in a classroom, we will have 88.48% students that will never be accommodated in classrooms. And the secondary school section to students ratio, we had 1 to 43 students status in 2020, and now it reached 1 to 365 students. And this is, again, impossible. It is simple and a mere number that implies 88.2% of the students could not be accommodated in a classroom. Another indicator, primary school gross enrollment. We had enrollment of 85.45% in 2020. Now, by the attempt we tried to enroll grade 1 to 6 students, focusing on the children, it dropped down to 20.8%. Even this 20.8% is getting down and down. Maybe after some time, we may even have zero enrollment because students are rolling out because of the siege, because of the hunger, the famine, continuing. And on top of that, the continued drone attacks is returning students from the doors of the schools. So this is what we tried with the number we had attempted to enroll grade 1 to 6 so far. If we take textbooks to students ratio, in 2020 we had 1 textbook to 2 students. Now it reached 1 textbook to 9 students. This is again a mere figure. Otherwise we could have totally lost subjects in certain schools. So this is a total number which doesn't determine subject-wise. And even this number is because the students rescued the books that was in their hands. Whichever book was in stores of the schools is almost vanished, burned down to ashes. So this is the status we are in now. Finally, I want to extend a few messages to different parties and societies. In this report, as I stated earlier, no implied effect of the direct damage is reported, like the psychological, psychosocial, socio-economic, and no monetary estimation is put in place in this report. then we demand different mandated institutions, scholars, professionals, to work on estimating the overall implied effects and meet the foreseeable demands of Tigray and Tigrayan educational society. Second, GSTS, the Global Society of Tigrayan Scholars, local scholars of Tigray in different associations, Tigrayan diaspora, Well of Tigrayans, medias, and other supporters of Tigray shall respond to address the damage on Tigray's education system and the people of Tigray. Thirdly, UN agencies, international and local NGOs, and civic societies should join hands to mobilize different resources and address emergency demands and long-term rehabilitation or reconstruction endeavors of Tigray. Lastly, we want to remind the world community and the UN that children in Tigray are not allowed to enjoy the rights to access education and the right to be protected. These are reflected in various UN conventions and declarations. Thus, we call upon all agents of children's rights and protection to advocate enough for immediate response for the Tigrayan educational society and Tigrayans as a whole. نمهر نمكت Tigray تسعر. I thank you.